Well, I grew up on a farm in Cutler, California. That's near Orosi and nearby Celia, California. And my dad was a blacksmith in the old country, but there were too many blacksmiths immigrating at that time, so he had to learn the shoe repair trade. He tried to get me interested in the shoe repair, but I saw my first hot rod. By that, I knew that's what I wanted to do. Nothing could be more fun than running one of these little Model T, stripped down Model Ts. I learned by hanging around my friend John Athens and his brother Jim Athens, and they had Model Ts, and he'd take us to school on that. We'd hang on the fenders and go to school on running on the running boards and so forth. But we found out from the owner of one of those little cars that if you want to see a lot of them, come up to the dry lakes. El Mirage or Muroc Dry Lake was the best. And they went up there, and we found out that hundreds of cars were there, and they come from all different sections of Southern California, maybe even Arizona or Oregon would come up to run time trials for straightaway speeds. The Model T had a lot of hop-up parts available. Overhead valve cylinder heads from Raggio and Frati, Roofs, and some other manufacturers back there in the Midwest. So we were able to pick those up sometimes for $5 or $10. When we'd hop up the Model T, we'd usually break the crankshaft or something, and we went to the junkyard, and for $65, we bought a V8 Ford engine, which had a few cracks and things in it, but it looked like a racing engine to us after looking at Model Ts. Later on, when I had picked up a set of maxi overhead valve heads that fit that V8 engine, I knew I needed a special cam. So I saved up enough money to $20 to go to Winfield to buy a cam. And he took a little bit of interest in me, and he showed me his cam grinding machine that he had built. And I was quite fascinated by that. This is Winfield's machine he made, probably maybe in the 20s, I think. And he went downtown on Machinery Row, and he bought a Landis internal grinder, and he made his own spindle for a bigger grinding wheel, and he made this cam grinding attachment. And this is the one he showed me when I first bought my first cam from him in about 1940. I was fascinated by how it worked, and after the war, that's when I decided I'd like to try this cam grinding. As kids, we had mentors. At first, it was just the local guys that were going fast at the dry lakes, and we soon learned that the real expert is Edward A. Winfield. But in later years, I decided I'd better go visit him and learn all I could from him, because there was a lot of stuff a lot of knowledge he had. This is the machine I had started with, and this is where it all began. I first bluffed my way into the cam grinding business, and with some new ideas and some new things to try. And that's the way it is That's what it takes today, is someone that'll step out and try something new and different. And this is the way it works, a rocking bar arrangement, and the master cam controls the shape of the that profile makes the right profile on the camshaft. So this is the way it's still done today. And actually we did about $1 million worth of flathead Ford V8 cams right on this machine here. I'm amazed myself that it all happened, you know. I'm sure lucky to be a part of it, really am. So I'd like to be remembered, I guess, for bringing in some new ideas or some breakthroughs, you might say, in the industry. Yeah. Yeah.
Gone, his voice can still silence a room, which literally saved me an awkward moment because somebody was going to have to shush Prudhomme and Garlits over here, and it sure as hell was not going to be me. A little touch and go there for a second. Housekeeping. In the event of an emergency, there's exits. I'll grab Don and Don. Just follow us, guys. That's all you need to do. Big thank you. Maybe his cell phone was going off. Big thank you to Rick Lorenzen, the man who created all this. He had a vision. And I think this room is so fitting as a tribute to Iske because it's called the Lions Museum, but it also represents all forms of motorsports. And Iske was involved in all forms of motorsports. So on behalf of Rick, and I'd also like to extend my thanks to his daughter Tammy and her continued patronage to all of us and keeping this building around, which I find it's ironic. This building is designed to do a lot of things, right? I think a bunch of you, when you walked around here, it brought back memories, right? This building is a brick and wood and concrete time machine. I see people pointing at stuff and said, I remember this. And it takes you back to a time long ago. And then for a lot of the students with the education programs that they do, it helps show what was long before many of those people were born. And it's also kind of become the de facto place to celebrate lives of the people that just left us. And I can't think of a more fitting place to be able to do this. So to get us started, I had some notes, but I think it's going to be a lot more organic if it's coming directly from the family. I'd like to start out with Richard Iskenderian, have him come up and start the celebration of life, because that's truly what this is. Richard, you didn't get the memo. When I say your name, you just walk on stage, and thought we rehearsed this 7 times. My God. We're still paying you. Don't worry, brother.
Thank you, Jack Beckman. Appreciate that. Well, I'd just like to welcome everyone and thank them very much for coming out to my father, Ed Iskenderian's memorial. This is a great place for it to happen. I want to thank our family for being here, for their support, my wife Norma, my daughter Shelley, and my brother Tim and his wife Leisha, and my Uncle Ben and Aunt Ann, and of course our nieces and nephews, which were Ron's kids, Wendy, Tammy, and Ryan. Well, actually it's Wendy Epps, but married name, but and Tammy and Ryan Iskenderian. And I would like to introduce Vic Masmanian right now to do the opening prayer.
Thank you, Richard. I'm honored to be here today to do a little bit of an opening prayer and welcoming everybody here to this event, this great event today at the Lions Museum. So I'd like to, sorry I'll be reading this, but it's better for me to read this than memorize it, to be honest with you. So, Heavenly Father, today we gather with grateful hearts to celebrate 104 extraordinary years of life, the life of Ed Iskenderian, known to so many as the Camp Father. Thank you for the gift he has been to his family, his friends, his community, and to the world of motorsports. You have been faithful to Ed, guiding his steps, strengthening his hands, and steadying his spirit. In Proverbs 16:3, we are reminded, commit your work to the Lord and your plans will be established. We thank you for the work ethic you placed within him, for the long days, the determined nights, the division, the grit, and the creativity that built not only engines, but a legacy. His hands labored faithfully, and through that labor, he reflected your own creative heart. Your word also tells us in Colossians 3:23, whatever you do, work it all with all your heart, and as working for the Lord. Iski's life stands as a testimony to that kind of wholehearted devotion to excellence, perseverance, and to faith. And now as we honor 104 years, a life spanning generations, we remember the promise of Isaiah 46:4. Even to your old age and gray hairs, I am he who will sustain you. Thank you, Lord, for sustaining him through every season. Galatians 5:22-23 says that the fruit of the Spirit includes love, joy, peace, and long-suffering. We see that steadfast spirit reflected in his life, patience through the years, endurance through every season, and the faith that has carried him more than a century. Bless this time of celebration. May his story remind us that a life built on faith, hard work, and integrity leaves a legacy that far outlives the years. Continue to pour out your comfort and peace over everyone here today as we remember and give glory and honor to you, Jesus, for Ed's life was well lived. In Jesus' name we pray, amen. Thank you, Richard.
Vic, I have a question. You guys hear me? My sound test? Why is your last name on the side of this Willys?
It's the legacy, our legacy.
Whose car was that?
That was my father, Big John Masmanian, yes.
That was in so many Iski Cam ads back in the day. That was pretty cool that happened. Just thought that was a neat factoid.
Our Iskenderian family, our Iskenderian family is truly grateful to the Lions Museum for hosting this memorial. And we want to especially thank Tammy Lorenzen, Lana Chrisman, and all the great volunteers here at Lions for making this evening possible. They do a wonderful job. And you know, there really couldn't be a better place to honor my dad. Lions was always his favorite racetrack. This is where he checked in on local racers, made sure his newest cam profiles were performing just right, and probably offered a little friendly advice whether you asked for it or not. When my brother Ron and I were about 10 years old, Dad would bring us to Lions on Saturday nights. To us, it felt electric. the sounds, the smells, and the legends. We watched drivers like Bones Below in the Masmanian Willie's Coupe, the Malacote Brothers, Stone Woodson Cook, Don Prudhomme, Tom McEwen, and occasionally Don Garlits when he made his West Coast tour. All these gentlemen are heroes of the sport. But while we were watching legends, little did we know we were actually standing next to one. After World War II, my dad was working on a Model T Ford with a flathead engine. And of course, he wanted a hotter cam. He tried ordering one from Ed Winfield, who was the most popular cam grinder at the time. But the wait was several months long. So my dad thought, hey, I took auto shop in high school, and I bet I could grind a cam. And because this was my father, he did. And they worked great. Soon word spread among local hot rodders, and soon he was grinding cams for others. Then he placed a small ad in the back of Hot Rod magazine that boldly said, "Winners use Iskenderian cams." And he figured, why not? Who's going to question that? And as he said in the video earlier, you could get away with a lot of things in the early days. And apparently no one questioned it. And so orders started coming in, and in the mid-1940s, if you could regrind 5 cams a day and sell them for $20 each, you could make a good living and support a family. And that's how Iskenderian racing cams began. On a shoestring budget, a lot of determination, and a pretty fearless attitude. Dad went on to have many firsts in the industry. He was the first president of SEMA, the first to sponsor a racer named Don Garlits. He was the first to offer contingency awards. He was also the first to use T-shirts and decals as advertising. And the list goes on. He didn't just build a business, he helped shape an entire industry. He was honored with inductions into the SEMA Hall of Fame, Chevrolet Legends of Performance, and just last year, the Daytona Motorsports Museum. Some of these trophies are on display over to your left in this room tonight. But if you knew my dad, you knew the awards weren't what mattered most to him. People did. Even in his later years, when names sometimes slipped away, he had a solution. He would greet everyone with a big smile and say, "Hi, pal." And somehow it worked. Everybody was pal, and everybody felt seen. Many of you probably remember the Cam Wars cartoons ads and Drag News magazine. Dad teamed up with Pete Millar, and together they created some unforgettable ads. One of my favorites was the 4-way rotating decal changer. As the car went down the quarter mile, it switched from Engel to Howard's to Crane, and of course finished with an Iskey. That was my dad. Competitive, creative, and always just a little bit mischievous. But really, what really defined him was how he treated people. This name, most of you probably won't even remember, but there was a racer back in the 60s, a drag racer named Earl Canavan, who ran a Lincoln-powered V8 top-fueled dragster. Now there's a good one for you. Earl lived mostly on coffee and donuts and slept at many speed shops, including the Iskey plant in Inglewood during the week. My dad really took a liking to Earl. He said, "Earl, you've got to promote yourself." So my dad went to a movie prop house, bought Earl a top hat and coattails, and said, "Put this on between rounds and walk around the pits and stands." But Earl was pretty shy. Most days, the most you could get him to do was put the top hat on. My dad even had the car painted President Lincoln. But that was my father. He believed in people. He lifted people up. He gave others a chance, sometimes before they even believed in themselves. He was one of the last true legends from the early days of racing. But to Ron, myself, Tim, and Amy, he was simply Dad. The man who took us to the track, the man who worked hard, the man who wasn't afraid to try something new. He lived boldly, he gave generously, and he loved this community. And there will never be another like him. Thank you all for being here tonight to celebrate my dad. I know that he's looking down from heaven right now with a big smile on his face. Thank you.
Thanks, Richard. And get rid of this paragraph, that paragraph, and that paragraph. I like to take notes and be prepared, but I love it when somebody with a true connection to the person we're honoring comes up and says that stuff. It's my greatest pleasure to not have to go into this stuff, and hearing it directly from you is fantastic. On speakers, clapping already, huh? Which Don gets to go first? So we were going to go by distance traveled and age, and well, I guess that just goes to one Don. So I want to let him talk, see what comes out of his speech here, and then maybe we'll add a couple things to that. So without further ado, our first speaker is going to be Big Daddy, Don Garlits, who was arguably the first professional corporate sponsorship in all of drag racing with the Iskenderian Race Cams Swamp Rat Top Fuel Dragster. And at 94 years young and the recent recipient of a cochlear implant, Don can now hear pretty darn good again. Take it away, Big Daddy.
So nice to see so many nice people. Some of my really old friends are out here tonight. And I have a few things to say about Iskey cams. I used them a long time, long before I was in business, when I was just a hot rodder on the street. With a flathead, I had Iskey cams, and it was used a 1007B. It's a real nice cam for a flathead for the street. And we built a lot of engines for guys to race them, and we usually put a 1023 mushroom cam in those engines. And of course, when I got my Chrysler, my first Chrysler, the first thing I did was call up Iskey, and I got a crossflow cam for it, 1954 first, 331. And then I moved that crossflow cam into the 1956. And just about that time, Cook and Bidwell went 166 miles an hour out here in California, set the new world record. First car over 160. The experts had said that 159 would be as fast as anybody'd ever go in a quarter mile. Roger Huntington from Detroit, an engineer, made that statement. It was a story in Hot Rod Magazine. And when Cook and Bidwell went 166 with a 5-cycle cam, and that was the big deal. That was the new word, 5-cycle. Some of the cam grinders made fun of that. They thought it was a joke. It wasn't a joke. It was a cooling cycle. Anyway, I called up and got a 57 Chrysler, then a 392. I called Iskey, and they sent me a complete cam and kit, $92. That was the springs, push rods, lifters, and the retainers, and the little locks for the retainers. Imagine that. I still have the invoice that's in the glass case in my museum. And I went to Cordova, Illinois, and talked to Emery Cook personally and asked him how he got 100% nitromethane through a Stromberg carburetor. And he just, one sentence, he rattled out this whole sentence of everything you had to do to a Stromberg carburetor. And my wife was standing right there next to me, and he says, "What did he say?" And I said, "We got to get out of here. We got a lot of work to do." So we towed down to our gas station in Port Huron, about 10 miles away from the drag strip, and there was an old man sitting out in a rocking chair in front, and probably about 40. And I said, "I got to use a vise and a drill motor and some electricity. What will you charge me?" He said, "What are you going to do?" I said, "Well, I got to drill my carburetors out." You had to take the old dump tubes out and drill the holes out, put quarter-inch tubing in place of the original dump tubes. And he says, "Let me hear you again. Are you going to drill into a carburetor?" I said, "Yes, sir." He said, "If you let me watch, there'll be no charge." So I let him watch. Anyway, long story short, we went back to the track the next day. They lined me up with a Cook and Bedwell car for the first round. My wife said, "Why did they give us the fastest car at the meet?" I said, "Well, I guess they wanted to make sure he got through the first round." And I outran a Cook and Bedwell car with a 996. And that really inspired me. I came home, I made all these adjustments to the fuel system mostly. Everybody was running the nitromethane through a little half-inch tube from the fuel tank to the fuel block, and then out of the fuel block would come the 6 hoses for the 6 carburetors. Well, Wind, in the meantime, had made an 8 carburetor manifold, cast aluminum, and I got that, and I knew that that little half-inch hose wasn't going to feed that fuel block with 8 3/8 hoses coming out of it. So I built this great big fuel system, 2-inch lines from the tank through a great big gas valve and into the homemade fuel block. And it went 165 miles an hour on the warm-up on 80%, and we put the 100% in. It wasn't really 198 what we ran. And it went off the charts, and they didn't know how fast I went. If they'd have come back and told me what the ET was through the traps, I would have given them the math and told them what it was, but they didn't know, so they said they were going to call California on Monday morning. So they called California, and they told them that I'd went 176 miles an hour, and but they didn't call me from the JCs who ran the track. At about 12 o'clock on November the 11th, 1957, the phone rang. And my wife answered the phone. She took all the phone calls because my brother and I were working in the shop. We couldn't talk on the phone. We had to be working on the cars. And she come to the door and she said, "Ed Iskenderian is on the phone. He wants to talk to you." I couldn't believe my ears because I only just talked to the people on the counter. I didn't know who he was, you know. I wasn't a personal friend. And I'll never forget the first day. He says, "Hi, pal, how are you? You just set the world record. You're the new world record holder, 176.4 miles an hour in 8.79 seconds. And I couldn't believe it. And he says, "Do you need any parts?" I said, "I need new tires. I need some new spark plugs." We ran a special plug then, a Lodge plug. It was real expensive. He says, "You got them." And so started a deal that was unbelievable. You know, that 5-cycle cam, I have to talk about that for a minute. He never really got the credit for what he had actually discovered. It was a system that, you know, nitromethane is a tough fuel to deal with. And most of the people who ran it just ran 20, 25, maybe 30%. And when you got over that, it burned up everything. You couldn't cool the engine properly. And Ed is the one that figured out that if you open those two valves, the intake and the exhaust, on that overlap and make that much longer, it would give time for that cool air to come out of the intake manifold with the fuel, go across the exhaust valve and quench it, because that's what was getting hot. Also, the plug had to be cooled down too, because it was glowing. And that fifth cycle was a cooling cycle, and that was what the reason for the 48-inch exhaust pipe on the unblown cars, because that was the column of air moving through that pipe. And when those two valves were open, it didn't care where the piston was, it was going to keep right on sucking. So it actually was a kind of a little top of a supercharging thing on top of it. And it really made a difference. You could actually run the 98% and go right through the traps, and it was still running just fine. And that's something that they couldn't do before with that kind of percentage. You had to have less percentage. And today, it's still the same thing. They've got port nozzles in the manifold, down in the heads, and then that intake valve opens, and the exhaust valve is exhausting, and there's at least a teacup full of nitro waiting right there behind that intake valve. And of course, there's 50 pounds of blower pressure in those manifolds now. That valve opens up, and it blows all that fuel through there across that red hot valve and that red hot plug. And that's the flames you see sticking out of the pipes. It's got nothing to do with the combustion. That's the fuel that's burning in the hot pipes that has just cooled the spark plug and the exhaust valve that allows the next cycle to take place. It's absolutely a fifth cycle. And Ed Iskenderian is the guy that did it. And it wasn't a joke. They thought it was just an advertising deal. But after I set that record that Ed put me on the back cover, he owned the back cover of Hot Rod Magazine. And he's the one that kept fuel drag racing alive, because the NHRA when Cook went 166, it scared NHRA to death. And a lot of the Southern California strips didn't like it either. They thought it was too fast. So they went to gasoline. Well, AHRA and a couple of other DRI and the smokers up here in Bakersfield, and then the Bob Osiki's association over in the Carolinas, they kept running nitro. And Iskenderian is the one that every month on Hot Rod Magazine, all the guys that ran Esky cams were all plastered all over the back of Hot Rod Magazine. And of course, I was winning races everywhere and setting track records. And every month, my car was on the back of Hot Rod Magazine. In other words, you turn the magazine over there, and they could see what I was doing. And I mean, it was the advertising was priceless, because wasn't getting anything in the Hot Rod Magazine, because Wally Parks was the editor, and he was actually promoting gasoline. He didn't want the nitro to be getting popular. And of course, it was getting popular because it was so fast, and the flames out of the pipes and the stink, you know. Everybody here knows that the nitro is the only. Nitromethane is the fuel for cars, alcohol's for drinking, and we wash parts in the gasoline. But as I think back, you know, nobody knew who I was. And we did have drag news, I'll say that, but that was a very low publication tabloid. And they did, you know, that's how we kept up with what was going on. Everybody had a drag news. There was no national dragster. And that's how all those people and AHRA and all those associations got publicity, was from drag news. But that did not go out like Hot Rod Magazine. Those ads on the back of Hot Rod Magazine made my career, it got me started. And I have one more little deal. I come out here in 1959. I did pretty good. I won 3 of the races out of 2 in 1959, but I didn't get to race Art Chrisman, and he was the guy that won Bakersfield, and he was the big name out here. And the guy at Riverside, California, just wanted to put that race together. So he put this great big East versus West race. And they had all the California cars were lined up there, and even had Chris Karamessinis here. But For some reason, Postolian didn't show up. I don't know what it was, but he was supposed to be here too. And we all went out there to Riverside, and I'll tell you, it was something else. They paid $7,500 for me to come out here for that race. And the crowd was crazy. I mean, that whole place was just solid people. And I think we made about 8 or 9 runs that day. Unbelievable. And it was just me and Art Malone and Ed Iskenderian. Iskenderian was helping me on the car. But the thing that's so funny, we had a 50 Cadillac tow car. It was an old Cadillac that I'd put a special motor in for the moonshiners, and they never come to get it, and I had a mechanic's lien title. And but it was a fast car. I mean, really fast. And the fuel pump quit on it right in the middle of the event. And in those days, it was not an hour or so to get ready. You come back from the end and went right into the staging lanes, refueled the car, took a look at a couple of plugs, and it was time to go again. And that fuel pump quit. And Ed went over to he had a Cadillac just like it. He went over to his Cadillac, and he had a spare pump in the trunk. And he pulled the pump off my Cadillac and put the pump on the Cadillac, repaired it while we got the car ready for the next round. And I thought that was so cool that he's out there doing that. And but he was one of the most down-to-earth people I've ever met. He doesn't seem like he ever had a mean bone in his body, but he always had good ideas about ads. He had some of the trickiest ads. I'll never forget the one about Prudhomme was going to race, I think, Don Prudhomme, the Grierback and Prudhomme car was going to race Kermasini's, maybe at Long Beach it was. And they had this really funny ad, that, like a comic strip. And Ed thought that whole thing up, and everybody just had a real laugh about that. He did all those kinds. And then one time they was making fun of the fifth cycle, and so he had a clown. He had a clown in the fifth cycle, and it went on like that. And the last really thing that went on with me racing-wise, in 1988 I wanted to go to Bonneville. I'd never been to Bonneville. And we're going to go with a flathead. There was a flathead record that was open, and we thought might be able to get that. And me and some of the guys got together, and they built a streamliner. And I went out to Bonneville, and Iskenderian was the major sponsor for the car. It had the big sign, Esky Cams, on the side of it. And I have the car in my museum, and I did, in fact, set the 200-mile-an-hour record at 217 and some change, and put me in the 200-mile-an-hour club. And that was with an Esky Cam in a blown flathead 50 Ford on gasoline, not fuel, just a gas record. And that was about the deal. And I tell you, I did a lot of autograph sessions with him at the end when he was over 100, and I was always just amazed that we went up to a special place up north of here, trying to think of the name of it, Monterey Beach or something like that, Monterey Park. And Ed was there signing autographs and selling his book, and I was just amazed. He was around 102, I think, at the time, and just out there signing autographs and talking to everybody. Had complete, clear thoughts in his mind. Carried his mind right to the end, and that's such a blessing, to keep your mind. And a little advice for all the older people here. It's more important to keep your mind active than it is your body, because the mind is where the computer is, and once it goes bad, nothing else is going to work right. So keep your mind active, and Ed did that. He always had his mind active. And like I say, my condolences to the family. I love them all. It's a great place over there. And what can we say? We lost one of the giants, and it's just the way it works. Thank you very much.
Hey, Joaquin. Okay, for those of you that weren't taking notes, 176.4, 98%, 48-inch pipes, quarter-inch dump tubes, 2-inch fuel line. There's going to be a test on this, so I want you guys to wrap your head around something for a second. That was 69 years ago. And he rattles this stuff off. When I was doing a lot of research during COVID, I'd get to a sticking point and I'd call him. And I'd say, hey, tell me about this. He goes, oh, yeah, that day was a Thursday, and we were towing with this car and gas. It's just absolutely unbelievable. To feed off a couple of the things that Don had said, in 1959, he was paid big money by the Smokers Club of Bakersfield to come out and run the Fuel and Gas Championships. It later became known as the March Meet, but it was the Fuel and Gas Championships. The Smokers Meet, that is exactly right, the Smokers Car Club. And Don did not do good at that 59 meet and lost to, well, will that person stand up, please? Hampton got kicked out already? Don Hampton is in the house today. Like Garlits is his claim to fame. So, but what happened is, after that race, Don G realized, I need to put a supercharger on the car. Do you know where they took the car to put it on? Iskie's shop. Do you know who was the only person that was trusted enough by both the Smokers and Don Garlits to hold that appearance money until Don showed up? Who do you think they handed the money to? Iskie. I think he gave Don half of it, but it still worked out okay for everybody. While on the subject of Dons that have done wonderful things for the sport of drag racing, how many of you grew up in Southern California? So we didn't have the privilege of seeing that black car with the number 204 come out very often. But we always had the privilege of going to a local track and seeing a guy kicking everybody's butt. And to this day, I'm sorry, I know how the voting went. The most dominant funny car of all time was the series of U.S. Army cars driven by this gentleman, Don the Snake Prudhomme.
Thank you. You got me out there all right? I think we can all go home after Garlits, don't you? What the hell am I going to do up here?
This is another hold my beer kid moment,
no shit.
right?
Now you know why this guy was so tough to beat, man. This Garlits, he's fucking, excuse my language. He's brilliant. I mean, he's really brilliant. And it's amazing, yeah. It's, oh my God. Well, on my side of things, I was never a gearhead. You know, when I came up, I wasn't like Garlits. I was in the Road Kings of Burbank, just a kid kicking around out in San Fernando Valley. And there was a guy in the club by the name of Tom Ivo, and I become real tight with him. This is probably 58, maybe 59. Barabbas. What year was that? 57. Shit, 57. Jesus. All right, 57.
But wait, let's have a reality check. 1957, 48-inch pipes, 98% nitro, right? 879, 176.40. Mutant memory. Prudhomme and I are kind of stuck. We can't really remember what month that was, right?
No, not really. No, it's amazing. But anyhow, where was I at? Yeah, so I was in the Road Kings of Burbank, and Ivo, Tom Ivo, was a big deal back then. I wish he was here tonight, but I don't see him here tonight. That's a shame, yeah. Well, he's not a kid either anymore, but 90 next month, amazing. But we were kids there, and I was working with Ivo and the Road Kings guy. But the big deal was Esky 5-cycle cams, and that's what Ivo had on his 2-inch car, his single-inch car. And the coolest thing of it all was we were going on the road, you know, it's going on tour, and that was like maybe 58, something like that. And we got Esky 5-cycle T-shirts. And man, that was the cat's ass back then. When we're back east and they see first off, Ivo with the Cadillac and the 2-engine car, Esky Cam, the thing was just beautiful. But shit, I don't know where I was at here. It's no big deal. Anyhow, no, it was wonderful, but I came along in the sport. And if it wasn't for guys like Esky that kind of really, I don't know why he liked me, but it sure seemed like it. He would call me pal like he does everybody else, but I got to know him, and it was really a big deal. He was just a huge part of, when you race as long as we have, it's kind of family, isn't it? I mean, this guy here, I've known him all my life. Ed lived 104 years old. Can you imagine? I don't know if I want to live that long. That's pretty long, man. I'll run out of money first. But I'm just here to say hi to everybody, and I love the guy. He was a great guy. He was just different than all the rest of them. He was a real racer, He understood pretty much all of it. The big problem I had was that I was driving for Keith Black, and he had Ingle cams, and that didn't go over so well. And one time we were at Bakersfield, I'm trying to think the year. It was early, 63 maybe, and we were in the staging lines, and our next guy to race was Art Malone. And Malone was working with, or Esky was working with Malone. They were good buddies, along with Garlits. And Malone was having some problems, and he came back to our car in the staging lanes, and I didn't say anything to him, but Keith talked to him, and he says, hey, he asked Keith, hey man, could you give us a little more time? We've been some push rods in Malone's car, and he says, if you want to, Keith Black of all people said, if you want to race this, get your car up here now. And he says, oh, Ed, right? He was real cool. So they did, and they kicked our ass. And Ed always reminded me of that. Anyhow, his family, great family. Thanks for everything. He was a great man. Just thanks everybody for being here. Following this Garlits, how about this son of a bitch? Is he sharp or what? Huh? How about it?
How about it for
He's
Prudhomme,
amazing.
guys?
Thank you for having me. I love everybody. Thank you.
I got to follow every one of you up here. U.S. Fuel and Gas Championships. It kind of put Garlits on the map because it made him a touring professional. And you could argue the first touring professional likely was Ivo with the capable assistance of Don Prudhomme, and had no idea what fame he was going to rise to. But the first race was called the U.S. Fuel and Gas Championships. Do we know who won the nitro category there? Tony Waters runner-up to Art Chrisman. But somebody won the gas portion of that, which was just as big a deal, Tommy Ivo. Unfortunately, he was a little under the weather tonight, but the point I want to make is if you guys look right and left and around behind you and 5 rows in front of you, this room is full, and we've packed it quite a few times before with Roland's celebration, with Ed Pink's memorial, but this might be the record. This is the most horsepower I've ever seen in one room at one time. Al, did you have a couple of shots just to keep the edge off? So drag racing really came from the dry lakes. On that video that you saw of Ed at the beginning, that California, Ed was just the right guy at the right place at the right time. California provided the good weather, the dry lakes. It was just the right mixture to create the hot rod industry. And then this was even pre-war, but post-war, you had a lot of young guys coming back with mechanical know-how and some spare change in their pockets. And before they started families, they went out to the races. And they went from the dry lakes, and it evolved into the drag strips. They were closer. It was less wear and tear on your car getting up there. But a lot of folks, just that hunger for land speed, that's cool. Like, that's my bucket list. I want to go land speed racing. And maybe, and Al, if you want to start heading up here, I'll talk fast, or you can walk slow. Maybe the most coveted record in land speed, and one of the most long-standing, and Al can clarify that, would have been the piston engine, wheel-driven vehicle, and it was the record set by the Summers brothers in 1965, and it stood for how many years?
Till 91.
And we're going to find out who broke that. And that, well, there's a microphone just for you, Al. We think you're that important. Ladies and gentlemen, Al Teague.
You know, to tell you the truth, I don't know why I'm here. But this guy here, I don't know his name. He told me to stand up here, put my feet up here, and talk into this little thing. But the only trouble is, he didn't tell me what to say. But anyway.
You can read the last 3 pages of mine if you want.
Well, you know, a lot of mine has already gone down the tubes. But that's okay. That's what part of it. The thing is, that I remember about Ed, always reading, as they said, his advertising. Ed was not only a good businessman, he was a showman, and he was a gearhead. Anything from compression ratios to gear ratios, Ed wanted to know. And anyway, but his ads were something else. I brought one along with me, just for the heck of it, just like Don was saying. And this one, he had the cover of Hot Rod Magazine right behind it. And there is Ed Iskenderian talking or arguing, I don't know which, with Einstein. There it is, right there, right there. And I don't know if E squared equals M2, whatever, but anyway, it's good. And not only did Ed have drag racing, he had boats there, and he also made connecting rods. They haven't covered that yet. And as Dodd said, he had blow drive kits. And Ed was the man. He always stayed one step ahead of his competitors, I think. And he did a good job. Look at the people here. He's really well respected and everything. But another thing, I remember his cartoons that he would put in. He'd put it in Drag News and certain ones. Drag cartoons with Pete Millar. And just looking here, that car right there was in the Gasser Wars, and Ed came out with a cartoon. And of course, that was Ed's favorite. It had Iskey on it and everything. And the guy that ran that, his cartoon name was Big June. Now, the car that he is running against is sitting out in the lobby out there, and it was run by 3 different people. And what the cartoon said on that, it said one of them name was Pebbles, the other one was Pulp, and then we have the last one, which was the driver, and he was Chef. Now, if you're not old enough to remember those names, what it was Stone, Woods, and Cook. Now, Stone was Pebbles, and Woods was Pulp. And of course, Cook being, he was the chef. So, but that was Ed. That was his humor. That was everything. And then later on, this country was in kind of a turmoil. We couldn't get gas or enough gas in this country. So what does Ed do? He starts a cartoon. And in that cartoon, of course, he's selling his cams. And what the cam was, it was a Mylamore cam. Now, if you get that cam, you're going to get better gas mileage, supposedly. But anyway, what he had, in his cartoons, he had him and Uncle Sam marching side by side. And here, Uncle Sam was in his full rig, top hat, red, white, and blue all over. And Ed was a little bit shorter and a little bit more big around. And he was wearing his business suit, but on his lapel here, he had a big round button. And inside that button was the letter I. And of course, that was an Iskee button. But anyway, they didn't have guns on their shoulders when they were marching. They had cams. And what the poster said, good for your country, Iskenderian, Mylamore cams. Buy them at your local authorized dealer. But that was Ed. And one of my favorite stories, and it's favorite because I'm in it. In about 1976 or so, or 75, I was building a new Bonneville car to take it up the Salt Flats and hopefully set a record. And my friends and I were working on it, and we finally got it up there. And we got it in line, and sometimes when you put it in line, those lines are pretty long, waiting for your time to run down the course. And we were waiting, and all of a sudden, I looked up, and there was some storm clouds coming in, and the wind started blowing. And it just happened that Ed was right by my truck, my push truck, and the only thing to do, we have to take shelter. So I got in, and I yelled for Ed, get in the truck. So Ed walks over, opens the door, he sits in there. Well, before that, I had some duct tape that I used, and I wadded it up kind of loosely and everything, and I didn't want to throw it on the salt, so I threw it up on the dashboard. And Ed comes in there, and he sits down, and I was kind of in awe. You know, here I'm sitting in a truck by myself with Ed Iskenderian. Not that I didn't know him, but I didn't really know him that well then. Whenever I wanted a cam or something, I called up, and I talked to maybe Andy on the phone, or I talked to Ron, or, you know, somebody else, maybe even Nolan over here. But anyway, he sat there, and we didn't say too much, and he walked over and didn't walk over. He looked over, and he picked that wadded up duct tape off the dash. He must have sat there for 20 minutes to a half an hour, and finally he takes the end of that duct tape and he puts it up on my dash and lets it hang down almost to the floorboard and says, "Here, you got a piece of tape you could use." Now, if that's not Ed, I don't know who it is. You know, I don't think he ever threw anything away. But anyway, that's my little story there, and I have one other real short one. In Ed's last days, the wife and I went over to see him, and he was kind of out of it, but every once in a while he'd wake up. Now Ed had his faith, and when he would wake up, he would say, "Oh," he said, "I thought I'd be in heaven by now. I thought I'd be in heaven." Well, when the time comes, and I'm sure of this, when he got up there and St. Peter saw him, he opened the gate and said, "Hi, pal." Thank you.
Hey, Al. Just real quick, you had asked a question earlier. Could you just let the audience know your fastest time ever?
Well, in 1991,
Oh, I meant the short answer.
we were lucky enough to do an FIA two-way run at Bonneville and also sanctioned by SCTA at the same time. And we ran, well, we had on one down run, it was 425 average over a mile. And then we came back and it averaged out just slightly over the Summer Brothers. But the Summers was in FIA by that time was a different class. We beat Tom Cobb's 1947 record. So I was pleased with that.
So the number is?
409.986.
So Al, that's the answer to your question, why was I sitting up here? That's why you're sitting up there. Al Teague, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you, thank you.
So, unless there's a Southwest captain up there, Al, I think you're going to take the prize for top speed of the meet there. 425, that's just amazing. Again, I got notes, but I love hearing it from the speakers more. I just think it flows better and it's just more organic. So, Mike, if you want to head up, Mike is it correct? You're CEO of SEMA, correct? So SEMA has evolved, and I hope Mike offers some clarity on what those initials stand for, how it's branched out into PRI, and where its roots came from, because it really ties just absolutely full circle here. So, ladies and gentlemen, Mike Spagnola.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I'm here sitting with my heroes of all time. I mean, I feel like I'm in a drag race with these guys, and I'm on a tricycle. I mean, you guys, I can't believe I'm here with you guys.
I like how Al just looked over like a kid that was in trouble for talking in class. That's funny, Al.
Hey, thanks, everybody, for letting me be here. Look, my job's to talk about the man behind the machine. He gave us a place to race. He gave us a way to build. And he gave us a reason to dream. And for me, it was really that dream. My first encounter with Ed was about 50 years ago. And we used to cruise Valley Boulevard here in Alhambra. And I'd either go to Blair's Speed Shop or Performance Specialty. Well, I needed a camshaft, and I had 2 days to work on a car before I had to go back to work. And they had messed up my order. So they let me go down to the shop, to Ed's shop, to pick up this camshaft. And I got down there, and sure enough, there was Ed. And he walked over to the counter, and I thought I met Elvis. It was so exciting to meet this guy, and I was already in the industry, but it really gave me the opportunity to find out that these guys were real people. And I found out that I was part of that shop, and I was really part of the family. And he made me feel that way. And I got a chance, he talked to me about the right way to put the camshaft in and all those sorts of things and those technical. I don't think I remembered a thing because I just stared at him the whole time. But I know that sticker I got to put on my car had to be worth about a half a second. But anyway, he was the man. He started in the dirt and the salt and not in the boardroom, not like we are today. Ed's first hot rod was a custom Model T Roadster, and I'll tell you more about that in a minute. But he was the guy pushing the limit, right? He was the first pushing the 100 miles an hour on the dry lake that they thought that was the edge of the world, and it was great to hear some of those stories from you guys. I got 100 stories to tell you about Ed, and I wish I could sit here all night and tell you about him, but one of the funniest stories and one of the ones I got to talk to him, I got to interview him a few times. And early on in his career, he was talking about he met these guys, and he went down to his buddies, and they would hang out at the tar paper yards. And some old-timer called them a bunch of a-holes, and they should get to work. Well, I don't know if you guys know this story, but they leaned into that, and their first car club was called the Bungholders Club. So he didn't just break records, he broke all the rules and what was possible. So I asked him once if he realized that this industry would become a $53 billion a year industry and $337 billion in economic impact, 102 million American jobs. He was one of the founders of all of this. And he didn't quite get it. He said 53 million. I said, Ed, 53 billion, and he would just giggle. But he had no idea of this being this global empire that he would be part of. He just, as somebody said earlier, he just wanted to sell 5 camshafts a day, and he would tell me that story. And if he could do 5 camshafts a day, he could make $100. And it took him an entire year of grinding to get to that number, but he got there. And what an amazing story about that was. Innovation just took work. It took time, and it took guts, and Ed had those guts. He was the first, in 1963, a bunch of guys got together because Revell was making models, and they wanted to use the logos. They wanted to use the decals on these models. And so a bunch of guys got together, and I think Vic Edelbrock Sr. was there, and Mickey Thompson was there, and of course Ed was there, and a bunch of them got together to talk about how they were going to do that and how would they license it. And they got a lawyer in the room, and they figured out that they had to create this trade association called SEMA. So they got talking about it and what that would look like. Well, Ed got up to use the bathroom, and when he came back, he found Ed was the president. They made him the president, and he said he had no idea what that meant, but he volunteered as the very first president of SEMA. It was amazing. So they knew they were stronger together, and he stepped out of that restroom and became that president. He was the first to exhibit at the SEMA show in 1966 under Dodger Stadium. There were 100 exhibitors then. Today we're 2,500 exhibitors, and we take 3 million square feet. He never missed a show in 60 years. He was the heartbeat of the floor. Everybody was so excited to see him. He's also the very first person to be both in the SEMA and the PRI Hall of Fame. And I will tell you, I got a chance to interview him for the PRI Hall of Fame about a year and a half ago. And again, one of my favorite stories is you guys told me that I could have 15 minutes with him, because after about 15 minutes, he would lose his memory and he would need to rest. Well, we went an hour and 25 minutes. And he was right in the middle of the story when he finally did freeze. So you guys picked him up and you took him to the couch, and he fell right asleep. Well, we packed up our cameras and our gear and all that, and I started to walk out the door, and he stood right up and finished the story that he had started to tell. It was just crazy. So anyway, when I got there, by the way, he was in a lawn chair smoking a cigar, and at 103 years old. So another great story. You guys saw the video with that Model T that he was in there. So I got a chance. 13 years ago, I joined SEMA, and the very first job they gave me was to take that Model T out of the Pomona Museum and bring it to the SEMA garage and go through it and get it ready to do that filming. I was pretty scared. I got to be honest. I was pretty nervous. If that car had anything gone wrong to it, I would have been mud, right? I would have had to move to some foreign country because I couldn't stand the fact that maybe that car would get broken under my watch. So the car came in, and I got a chance to talk to Pete Shaporis and some other guys about the car, and really took very close care of this car because it was history to me. It was very famous, and I couldn't mess it up. And so I literally would call Pete and some of the other guys every 10 minutes to say, is it okay if I take the starter apart, and should I reuse this cotter key? Because I didn't want to mess up this history of this amazing car. Well, anyway, we got the car done. Ed came over to the shop, and we fired it up for the very first time in many, many years. I had to put some new Coker tires on it. And we took it out to the dry lakes. Well, we worked all morning with it, and we filmed with it all morning and got some great footage that some of you guys have seen here. Well, at lunchtime, he took a nap. Well, the car didn't have a door. You had to climb over the car to start the car, of course, and you had to pop the clutch to kill it. So you could start it with a starter button, but you would kill it by popping the clutch. I would make sure that this car was, I'd have a fire extinguisher, I'd have all the tools, I had a process for starting the car and make sure it would run right. Well, lunchtime comes, he takes a nap, we go have some lunch, and I'm sitting in a lawn chair, and all of a sudden I hear the car fire up. Well, Ed had walked back out, and he'd pushed the starter button and fired the car up. And I ran to the car, and sure enough, the center carburetor was leaking. And I thought, this car's going to catch on fire any second. Luckily, I had a couple rags in my pocket, and I threw some rags down the carburetors, installed the car, and I went back to the motorhome and got my toolbox and the fire extinguisher and some towels, and I started cleaning up all the gas. Well, I started to take the top off the carburetor, and Iske looks at me, and he goes, Mike, just hit it with a hammer. And I said, Ed, I'm not hitting this car with a hammer. I'm telling you right now, if anything happened to this car, I'm dead. Like, I'm done. And so I started to unscrew the carburetor, and he goes, Mike, hit the carburetor with a hammer. It'll unstick the float. And I said, Ed, like, this car's, it'll be ruined. So I grabbed the screwdriver, and he goes, do you have a hammer? And I said, yeah, and I took out a mallet, and he goes, hit it. And I tapped it, and he said, Mike, hit the carburetor. So I hit it again. He goes, give me that hammer. Bam! Hits it as hard as he can, reaches over, starts the car, no more stuck float. That was Ed. That was Ed. No special tools, no computer, no special tools to run anything. Look, all of us at SEMA and PRI, we're going to miss him dearly, and the show just this year will not be the same without him. But we build, we race, and we win because of Ed. One of the greatest things that I saw here tonight was Ed's Bible, and it was just a reminder that he's in heaven now with Jesus, and he's thinking, and we're bench racing, and I can't wait to see him again. But Godspeed, Iski. We love you, and we miss you very much. Thank you.
Mike Spagnuolo. Amazing how many of your notes disappear when all the different speakers leave the stage, huh? Iski always had a novel way of promoting things. We heard about the T-shirts. We heard about the different advertising in Hot Rod magazine. You know, Ed had said, I started advertising in the second issue of Hot Rod magazine. And I asked him, well, why not the first? He said, I didn't know it existed. As soon as I knew that they had that magazine out, I knew it was going to be something for the sport and for the industry. And I think it was issue number 6, June of 1948. That car that Mike's speaking of was on the cover of Hot Rod magazine, and the car still exists very much like it looked back then. And I'm hoping our next speaker, Alex Taylor, will also shine a little bit of light on how that thing kind of evolved to where it is and where it sits right now. So, Nolan, I appreciate you writing this because specifics matter here. So Alex and I's paths cross at the drag sometimes, but the type of cars she races are a different category. She's usually doing the touring events. I'm doing the NHRA tour. What I love about hot rodding, it doesn't care how old you are, how tall you are, what color your skin is, what religion you are, or what sex you are. Hot rodding is about your head, your heart, and your hands. And I think it's so awesome, and maybe you'll go into a little bit about you and your father doing this, but she is the first modern era Iski ambassador. She got the, Robert E. Peterson was the man who started Hot Rod magazine and all of Peterson Publishing, and she was awarded the SEMA Peterson Media Award, and first female to get that in 21 years. But what I like about our sport is not first female. It doesn't matter if you're a guy or a girl. We're all car people. Come on up, Alex. Alex Taylor, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you, guys. If you guys hear something beating, it's just my heart in my chest, because that's a lot to follow. But anyways, it's an absolute honor to be standing up here and to be speaking after these legends that were speaking before me, and to just have a chance to celebrate Ed's life. Ed and the Iski name, the Iski family, they've all played a major part of mine and my family's life over the past 7 years. And I'm thankful that I had the chance to actually get to know Ed, whether it be at the family dinners on Taco Tuesdays or sharing a conversation about the latest racing adventure. Even though our age had a gap of over 7 decades, we were still able to relate because we found a shared love for our industry, racing, and innovation. I didn't get to know him during his early years of building his legacy that we all know, but I did get to know him in some of his last years, and for that, I'm very grateful. So I remember the first time that I saw Ed. It was probably 5 or 6 years ago, and I walked into the Iski lobby for the very first time to tour the facility. And as I looked around at the memorabilia on the wall, I glanced over to the corner, and I did a double take, because there was a man curled up on the couch in the corner taking a nap. And I tapped Nolan because I was like, hey, is that the Ed Iskenderian? And it occurred to me that it was, but we were really quiet as not to wake him because as you do at 100 years old, you do take a nap after you come and check on your shop. We went on about the tour, but when we got back to the front, he had woke up and left, and I didn't get the chance to meet him. But I loved getting to tell the story that I spotted Ed in his natural habitat, and I had no idea at the time that I would actually get to know him in the future. It actually wasn't until 2023 when I formally got to meet Ed, and talk about absolutely intimidating. My dad, Dennis, was getting started on building the Iskee tribute tee. Nolan had arranged for us to come out, and all of us were going to get to meet Ed, and we're going to get to record an interview series talking about his original Roadster and the new one. But the morning of that actual scheduled meeting, he woke up, and he wasn't having the best day, because, I mean, we all have that, right? Nolan warned us that he didn't want to talk anymore, but he had us come anyways, and standing out in front of the building was Ed on his phone. We slipped in, and he didn't see us, and we went back to Nolan's office. Nolan was actually kind of nervous. He was stressed and said that he just wasn't going to talk, and we tried to come up with a game plan. Finally, I said, well, let me just go out and meet him. It can't be that bad, right? Maybe I can convince him to talk to me. And Nolan looked at me like he was sending me into the lion's den. And he actually was almost right. I naively walked out front. I found him, and I timidly introduced myself to him. And I said, can we talk? And to my surprise, but no one else's surprise, he told me no, and then loudly told me all the reasons that we couldn't talk. But then I told him, it's okay, we don't have to record anything, but will you just tell me some about your car, and maybe we can go get in and out. And that unlocked something, and he leaned up against the wall, and he said, well, it was 1938. And I breathed the biggest sigh of relief, because that was progress. We sat out there chatting for a good while, and finally Norma came out, and she moved us inside, and we started filming our interview without protest. We just had to stop long enough from the storytelling so that we could get him set up. And that day, it was like I unlocked something in Ed, and throughout what turned into be an almost 6-hour conversation with him, I saw him light up and start to smile, and I watched the youth return to his eyes. We only stopped long enough to share an in-and-out lunch, which was so cool. All throughout the 6 hours, though, when I would ask him questions about stories I had heard for a really long time, he would say, this is how everyone knows the story, but do you want to know what really happened? And once we were done talking, later Richard, Norma, and Nolan told me that was some of the first time that they'd heard some of those stories, or at least told that way. We wrapped up the interview, but this time it was Ed protesting, because he wasn't done talking, which was quite the turnaround from earlier. I still laugh because he talked to me the entire time, and he showed no signs of hearing issues. But when Norma came to tell him it was time to go, all of a sudden, his hearing was completely gone, and he had no idea what she was saying. But then he turned back to me and carried on the conversation, and we'd keep talking about racing. One of my favorite non-car-related stories that he told me, and he was very adamant that he told me this story, was about shiny pants. That's correct, shiny pants. He wanted to tell me that shiny pants are somebody that sits in the office and doesn't do any work, and you don't want to be shiny pants. Those conversations I really cherish, and we went on to have more in the future. Later in our meetings, Ed loved to ask me about what our latest racing adventures were. Everything from drag racing to Bonneville, and he wanted to know what people's current strategies were and the latest technology. He loved to ask questions, and he was absolutely sharp as a tack. He'd offered me advice and tell me stories from his racing days. When I set my Bonneville record in 2024, he sent me a congratulations video, and in the video, he said, I can't remember the speed, but I think it was just a little over 235 miles an hour. And I laugh every time I hear that because his disclaimer was not necessary. He did, in fact, remember the speed. I felt honored to have Ed follow along with my career because he has a career and a legacy that so many people here and other places, obviously, followed so closely. But one thing that was common theme throughout all of our conversations was that he yearned to keep learning and staying up to date, and that's something that I think we all really admire about him. As we continue to move forward and continue to share the Iskee name, we're not going to leave Ed and his legacy behind, but rather, we're going to continue to bring it into the future with us. Think of it like the Iskey tribute tee that Jack was just talking about and Ed's original. From a distance, if you've seen the cars, the two look almost identical sitting side by side. The stance, the look, the color, everything about it, the details. But when you really look at it, you really see the notable but subtle differences. It's influenced by the legend, but it's powered by current innovation. In fact, when we asked what engine should go in it and got to hear his answer, he said, whatever the newest, best, latest, and greatest thing is, put that in the car. He didn't want to put something old. He wanted the newest, best, latest, greatest, and that's cool. And if that's not the perfect summation of Ed and what he created and stood for, then I don't know what is. As I wrap this up, I just want to say a thank you to Richard and Norma, Nolan and Ed for giving me the opportunity to get to be a part of the Iskey family. We love you guys. I realize that the relationship I got to have with Ed is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, and while Ed is no longer here, we will keep his legacy alive while continuing to be present at current events that represent our industry and maintaining an eye for innovation and foresight of what's to come, because that's exactly what Ed would want. We had a joke when we were building the Roadster that was an acronym. You know, like WWJD, what would Jesus do? We had WWED, what would Ed do? And luckily during that time, we were able to actually ask and hear his opinions, and he told us what he would do. And while we can't do that now, and we can't ask him that, he left us with a good idea of what that would be. Thank you guys so much.
Alex Taylor. So 2 notable times not to take a restroom break. Iskenderian when they're electing a president, and Don Hampton when he missed his 5 minutes of fame earlier, Don. We'll make it up to him. To the family, thank you guys again for giving this opportunity. And everybody in here is either a admirer, a friend, or a customer of Ed. And it's an honor to have been all 3 of those things. And I don't know that there's many people aside from the family that have spent as much time with the man as our last speaker, and there's no pressure whatsoever here, Nolan. But Nolan Jamoran, come on up here, but he can shine some light on this. He was still in grade school when he started cleaning up around the Iskey shop. And the transformation, not only that he's seen in the business, but watching him grow up from a kid to, what's your role now at Iskey Cams?
COO, I guess.
Chief Operating Officer of Iskey Racing Cams, and that's the man that's going to help the Iskenderian family take it into the next generation. Take it away, brother.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Actually, I just like to say I get shit done. That's really what it is. It's kind of, I think the little guy should go first. It's kind of hard to follow all these guys. But anyway, so today we gather to remember a remarkable man, but to honor his passion, ingenuity, and relentless drive in the pursuit of speed. Beyond camshafts, beyond the records and accolades, Ed was a man whose drive came from something deeper, a curiosity, a desire to learn, innovate, and go faster. Ed was a symbol of what the American dream looks like and what can be achieved when you dream big enough and work hard enough. Ed was a badass, basically. That's what it's down to, right?
Wait, did you want a crying break? I can handle this for you, brother.
This is Ed right here. He was a hot rodder, and some of the stories that he told us, like being in the bung holders, I've got a lot of good stories about him running from the cops and things like that, and getting in trouble with his parents. But I have a couple stories that I like to tell. One is, you know, as I said, I came up through the ranks, and he started to trust me. And this was about 5 years ago. We wanted to get the latest and greatest grinding machine. So Richard and Ron directed me to talk to Ed. So I did a lot of research, picked the best machine. They were going to do a bunch of custom stuff with us. And I had a meeting with Ed. It was just me and Ed in the lobby. And we were sitting chair to chair. And I proceeded telling him over a 2-hour conversation how good this is going to be, why I did this. So he's leaning closer. He's getting closer. If you know him and have talked to him, he was getting more and more interested. Pretty soon, he was almost face-to-face with me at a cigar, and he's just, And I'm thinking, oh, I got him. This is, because I'm good at spending other people's money, basically. But I'm thinking, oh, he's going to go for this. It's going to be great. And after about 2 hours, he finally said, how much is it going to cost? So I said, maybe $1 million all in. And he didn't react. So I thought, oh, good. But then he got a cigar, put it in his mouth, leaned back as far as he could in the chair. And I knew I was in trouble at that point. I knew I was in big trouble at that point. But after a lot of politicking and support from Richard and Ron, we actually got the machine. And when we got it in there, it was the newest Landis machine. And it was about 250 feet away from his original Landis that you saw in there. And that Landis machine was built in the early 1900s. So I was just praying that everything that I asked for that they were supposed to do would come to fruition, because he was watching every step of the way. When we actually got the machine in, he would go out there, and the first time he was out there, I had him grind a flathead cam, because he had told me it took him an hour and a half or so to grind a cam in the old days. Well, when he saw it spit out a cam in 5 minutes, he was amazed. He was like, by golly, gosh. And it was accurate. You didn't have to depend on anybody making a mistake. And one of my good memories that I remember is that you could look on the security camera, and he'd be sitting, he'd pull up a chair, and he'd sit with the cigar in front of the machine, just watch it pump out cams. So I knew I did good at that time, but it's really interesting that he saw from that 1900 whatever it was Landis machine to 2020 machine, and the difference that it made. So after that, he would bring people back, and he said, look at this. Look at my machine. Isn't it amazing? I said, oh, okay, yes. But anyway, that's one of my favorite memories of what it is. And then I have one other story. It's hard to have good stories, because all these guys have great stories. So Ed was getting an award at the PRI show in Cincinnati, and we were going to the show, and I think it was the Chevrolet Hall of Fame, or whatever they called it. And there was a mistake in the booking. I think it was Richard's fault. And Ed didn't have a room. And so so we all looked at each other, and the cam father was going to sleep in our room. So it was me and 2 other guys that set up the booth. And at first we were like, oh, this is awesome. We're going to get to hang out with Ed. And Ed is such a humble guy. He came into the room. He said, thank you for letting me stay in your room. And he was going to sleep on the floor. The owner of the company was going to sleep on the floor. So we were like, that's amazing. No, Ed, you can have a bed, because I knew I'd get in trouble from Richard. But so he ended up getting his own bed. We get some food and stuff. And he says, okay, I'm going to take a shower. And so we have one guy on the floor, another guy on the floor, which is Warren back there. And I took a bed, and then Ed had the other bed. So he goes to take a shower, and in the meantime, we're gossiping like little girls. Oh, my God, it's so cool, you know. Anyway, he comes out of the shower. We hear the door open. Comes out of the shower, buck naked. I don't know if anybody else has seen the cam father naked, but I got to say. The problem was our 2 guys were sitting on the floor about yay high. And
did they say, hey, pal?
I mean, let me tell you, Ed was gifted in a lot of areas, I'm just saying. But besides that, what I'm saying, I'm sorry to the grandchildren. But anyway, the funny thing was that those guys were just eye high, and he just walked, and it wasn't just to put on clothes, he's just talking. But, you know, he's a guy from a different time. During the war, you know, they would just take showers out in the fields. So it was really interesting. But yes, I got to see a lot of the cam father. And I will cherish some of the memories, not necessarily that one. But that just goes to show you, he was willing to sleep on the floor of the hotel because he knew we had to get up and work. That's the type of guy he was.
Nolan, there's no way we're sending these folks home with that being the final thought in their mind.
Well,
I'm sorry, brother. We spent an hour and 20 minutes and got some legends here. How about
Okay.
how about you give him another
Yes.
memory?
All right. So he loved smoking cigars, and I was very lucky. In 39 years, I got to see him every week about, and he would smoke cigars, so I took up smoking cigars. I got sick most of the time smoking the cigars until he told me that he mainly chewed on them and didn't really inhale. So I was like, oh, okay, so that's the trick. But I would go out there, and being a young punk kid, I thought, well, I've made it. I've moved from calling him Mr. Iskey to Ed. Hey, Ed. So I figured, oh, you know what? He smokes cigars, so I decided to light up a cigar in the back. And that was not a good idea. You have to be Ed to smoke cigars in your workplace, so that didn't go over too well.
So where's Lana? Hey, how about it one more time for the entire Lions Automobilia staff and Lana and Tammy Lorenzen. I just think it's such a poignant place to honor that man. And on behalf of Don Garlits, Don Prudhomme, Al Teague, Mike Spagnola, Alex Taylor, and Peeping Nolan Chamora, why don't you give them instructions? You are not allowed, please, we are not allowed to light up in here. So,
Don't give me any more trouble than I already am. But we're going to, as you go out, we're going to give everybody a cigar. And if you'd like to light up, we're going to do it. If you don't, keep it as a souvenir. But this was a stress reliever for him. And he didn't drink, he didn't do anything, but he smoked cigars, and he loved them till the end. So we're going to do that for him. So thank you.
some live long lives, some live full lives, and he got both of those. To the family, thank you all. For everybody that took the time to come out here, thank you so much.
Thank you, everybody.
That was great. It's something to remember. You know what I mean? This is all.